Hi, this is Elizabeth Agee from Colorado Farm and Food Alliance. We're here with Monica Wheatonen at Small Potatoes Farm to talk about her bakery business and also the Colorado Cottage Food Act. So, Monica, I understand that you have been instrumental in the legislation behind the Cottage Law Act in Colorado. Can you please tell us a little bit more about the history of that and your own story?
Well, it started out um, to be an opportunity for farmers to sell their excess and injured produce that could be turned into dehydrated vegetables or fruits, or could be turned into jams, or um, in the case of chilies and garlic, it could be dehydrated and either ground to make powders or blended with other things. And um, I got involved way before anybody, even before I knew what I was going to be up for. When Gail Schwartz was running for the state senate, every time she came to Delta County, I would show up. And I didn't at that time have a specific thing I wanted to ask her, but I thought, if I ever want to ask her something, she needs to know who I am. So I would just show up.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, I was farming here, and I recognized the stupidity of the current laws. It used to be if you drove along a back road in farm country, there'd be a stand out there, and there'd be a loaf of bread and some cinnamon rolls and the tomatoes and corn and, you know, the whole selection of things, some jams or jellies, and that was just considered a normal thing to do. And then it became, well, you can't do that. You have to have a commercial kitchen to make those things. And it was just ridiculous. And then I happened to notice, I think it was in 2003, that Kentucky passed a cottage food law. And I thought, that's something we need to think about. So I'm not sure when Senator Schwartz first came around. I'm sure it was several years later. But I mentioned it to her and gave her a copy of that and talked about the importance of it. And she was always interested in what would help farmers. But she didn't have a bill in mind quite yet. And when she was running for re-election, she asked all over her district what would help farmers. And then one of her daughter's friends was an intern on Zephyrus Farm one summer, and Gail asked her to go around and ask people what would be a helpful law for them. And everybody said, talk to Monica. So she came, and actually I wasn't here. I was at a meeting, but she left a note and said Gail would like 3 ideas for bills that would be good. So I came up with 3 ideas and sent them to her, and the cottage food law was the one that she decided to run with. It was signed in 2012, in March of 2012, and there was I forget how they call it, food safety class that was offered by the county health department the next week. So I took that and started baking and selling bread. It started out with a more limited list of things that could be produced and sold. It's been expanded considerably a couple of times. So it now includes pickles, and that includes fermented foods. And at first the health department didn't allow, and they still have things they say you can't make, which include salsa, which is kind of interesting because that one has vinegar in it, and it's more of a pickle than a, but I know that there have been problems with salsas that people have made, and I know the health department has to deal with issues when there's problems. So I get why they're nervous. But still, my impression now is that canned fruits could be sold, and I'm not sure how far I'd want to go with the possibilities. But since shelf stable is the thing, it seems like it can go pretty far. It doesn't, to my knowledge, include anything with dairy or meat in them. Like you couldn't can meat and sell that as a cottage food item. But there's a lot of things. I mean, it started out, as I said, a more limited thing. And one time when I was on the phone with her, I said, well, what about chili powder and garlic powder? Because I grew lots of chilies and garlic. And if you have enough, you've got more than enough. And then there are things you can do with them once they're cured. And so they put in spices. And so then I could make chili powder and garlic powder and other things. And then someone else I heard of in Denver buys spices and makes spice blends and sells those. And that never would have entered my mind as something you could do with the cottage food law, but there it is. Spices are one of the allowed things. So, you know, it's just been very interesting how people find a niche for themselves. You know, they see that list and then they kind of go, well, I could do that or I could do that. So it's been very interesting to see. Things have to be, they call it non-potentially hazardous, but it's essentially shelf stable. So I couldn't make a custard pie. I could make an apple pie. I couldn't make a custard pie and sell it because of the eggs, and they need refrigeration. And it doesn't mean that things have to be sterile and never would go moldy. It just means they can't be things that are going to create, you know, pathogenic problems for people, I guess is the way to put it. Maybe I don't have the exact words, but you kind of get what I'm saying. Shelf stable.
Yeah, things that are more not as likely to have botulism or mold or any of these kinds of problems. Right. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So the limitation is how much you can make. And in Colorado, it's pretty amazing. I have read some other cottage food laws, and there are some that $5,000 a year is what you can make on your cottage food products. In Colorado, it started out $5,000 per eligible item, $5,000 net per eligible item. So the sky's the limit. And then it was changed to $10,000 net
Per item.
per eligible item. And people would say, oh, that means sourdough and that means whole wheat bread. I said, no, it means farmhouse sourdough, it means miche, it means sourdough seed, it means
right. So
each one is an eligible. And I was actually asked during my testimony before the House if that was going to be a problem for me, that $5,000 cap. And I said, well, I make at least 20 different kinds of bread, and I work with a fellow who makes a different 20 kinds of bread, so no, it's not a problem at all. And I thought about saying, but didn't. And you think I couldn't come up with a slightly different formula for my farmhouse sourdough if I reached my limit? And, you know, you put in a little more whole wheat or whatever, and it would give it another name. It'd be another eligible item. So, yeah, no, that cap is certainly no problem for me. There was a time when somebody was trying to add some things to the law, and they were proposing a $50,000 limit per year to everything. And I said no to that because what we have is so much more, it gives you so much more leeway.
Yeah, to be able to really grow a business, right?
Yes, yes.
Jobs for people. And
yes.
be able to finance and keep the whole thing operating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. If I were younger, I would be there probably. The main thing then would be the marketing, because you sell directly. It's not, I can't do wholesale. I don't want to do wholesale, but I can't do wholesale. I can't put it into retail outlets. I sell from here, or I can go to farmers markets or things like Mountain Harvest Festival where there's a whole bunch of vendors. And that one of those recent bills also allowed a designated representative. So someone not me that I designated could go and sell my stuff. A friend of ours makes jam. He raises chickens and goats and Highland cattle, but he also makes jam. And in the years when he's able to do that, we sell the jam over here.
Mm.
I mean, he sells it from his place. If people come and buy product from him, he'll sell it to them. But otherwise, bread and jam go really well together. And
Yeah. Absolutely.
it's really helped him because he's very busy with what he's doing, and he doesn't need another thing to have to market, you know.
Absolutely, yeah. That's a big
Well, the only challenge was getting the law passed.
Yeah, and then that made it easy.
Well, yeah, I had the oven.
Uh-huh.
Philip had built the oven. I had a mixer.
Uh-huh.
I had grain and flour in the pantry. And I think by the time the law passed, Scott was farming here, so he was selling produce.
Mm.
So we had the customers coming already.
Right.
So
Clear pathway. Yeah.
one of the things I told the Senate Business Committee was, when I was testifying for one version of the bill, was that I could start a business without a loan with the cottage food law.
Right.
And if you're in your 60s or 70s, or I wouldn't have had money in my 40s either to start a business the way people do these days, but you can just start. And so Johan and I baked right here, and it was a sunny day in March, late March, and they were things were out here on the table and in baskets, and people came and bought them. And you know, you do that a few days, and then you have a little more income, and you buy more flour, and you make more, and people hear about it, and you just
Yeah.
grow a business in the way, in the sustainable way that people used to,
Right.
without big loans that, whether something comes up and you can't work and can't do this, you still have to pay your bills, and
Yeah.
you know, yeah. So it was, I am so grateful that we managed to get this done in Colorado, and many states now have these bills. So we're not the only one, but I do think we've got the best. One of my favorite ones is, we used to, well, every year except this year when it didn't happen, we were open for the farm tours during Mountain Harvest Festival. And that was actually my idea way in the beginning, because there were only concerts Saturday night, and people would come to town and there was nothing. And I thought, well, if they come out to the farms on Saturday afternoon, they'll look for us in the street at the market, you know, and look and want to come and buy our stuff.
Yeah.
And so that's what happened. I really don't know, and I actually have been so busy baking,
Yeah.
particularly since I bake in a wood-fired oven. It's a whole different process and effort, and it's way more fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And sensory and beautiful.
So the law was passed, and I discovered a number of problems with the implementation of the law, and I'd been told that it was easier to get a law passed than it was to get it implemented well. And so when I started this list, and I was talking to Senator Schwartz about it one time, and she said, well, we have to go back to the legislature next session and get it fixed. So we did. And that was very interesting for me, first of all, to see how a bill did get passed, and to see the who was friends with whom in the process, and so who could vote yes and who could vote no, and you know, it was just eye-opening, I guess you could say. But then to be able to go back the next year and get it fixed, and it was a totally bipartisan get it fixed. Everybody thought it was stupid, these things, little hurdles that were put in the way, and this misunderstandings, and at the same time, it's also understandable how any agency would read the bill and think, oh, well, that's something we need to deal with, or that's something that, you know, we already have a handle on, or we have, and so it's not like people were awful in their trying to shape how the bill worked. It's just that it was unnecessary and certainly not the intent. And so it was possible to go back and get that fixed. And that was really encouraging to me. Mm-hmm. In Kentucky, they actually started out with 2 tiers, and I think one of them, you might have been able to make pressure canned foods, but you had to take a half-day training or something for that. And that that could be a possibility here. So just depends on if there's somebody who's really keen
Yeah,
to do that. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. That wouldn't. Well, it was funny when we actually went back for pickles to expand it to include pickles, and Senator Schwartz had wanted pickles from the start, but the health department said no pickles. And everybody that we would say, well, why would they say no pickles? That's the safest thing, and
Yeah.
that's anyway. They had their reason, but it was overcome. I thought the pickle makers would go and testify. I mean, wouldn't you think that they're the ones who want it? And they all went, no, you know how to do it. You go and testify. So I went back and testified. And it was very interesting because I mentioned I was not comfortable, particularly speaking in public, but I forgot about the cameras there and the press there and that they were recording it, and I just had a really good time telling my story. Well, I would encourage them to find something they love to do and then figure out how much of that they want to do and experiment and whatever, but just start out small. I mean, if somebody wants to start out big and all of that, great, but this is an opportunity for any resident of Colorado can make use of this law.